It is a wonderful pleasure to welcome Adrian Underhill to this podcast. He is a musician hailing from Toronto, and he recently released a brand new album. It's titled After This. How are you today, Adrian? Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's discuss the album. I listened to it. I find it to be quite amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so tell us about it.
Well, it's my second record, and there was quite a big break in between. My first record came out in 2018, and so I spent a lot of time working on this, and good three years for sure.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of that was through the pandemic, and so I think that was one reason things kind of went slowly, but it it meant that I had a lot of material to draw from. A lot of different things were happening in my life during that time, a lot of big changes, and it also gave me the opportunity to kind of rewrite a number of times. There was a lot of material, more than an album's worth, that was, I kind of went through a first phase and then a second phase and a third phase, and a lot of the songs are from the third phase, but it took numerous rounds of writing to kind of get the songs the way I wanted them.
Mhm. So, do you consider there to be a difference in sound between this album and your previous one?
Yeah, I think, some of that is just different influences, different ensemble for sure. Like there's um almost no overlapping collaborators from this. I'm trying to think, from this album to the last one. I think it's all different people, different producer that I worked with. I co-produced on this new album. On the last record, I worked with an amazing producer named Kindness, Adam Bainbridge, and we flew to LA. We worked with musicians there. So it's a very different process and different people. And this time around, it was a lot closer to home. I chose a really, trusted friend to co-produce the whole album with me. We took a lot of time. Um, there was a few studio musicians, but a lot of it was done at home. Like 80% of this album was done
Mhm.
at home.
I see. So, what
Hmm.
are some of the musical inspirations that go into the making of this album?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, yeah, I'm trying to think through all the different sort of phases. I was, listening to, I'd say there's things that I kind of will always draw on, sort of classic songwriters like Carole King and Todd Rundgren, and I think there's, Michael McDonald or things like that that are part of my writing DNA, like the types of chords that I choose, the types of melodies. And then there's things that inspire production and trying to push production in like a different direction, things that are more modern, like Charlie XCX, or um, things that are more adventurous like that inspire me to try and find new sounds and just make things sound like new and weird, and
Mhm.
um so it's kind of a mixture of those things.
I see. Yeah, I do know of Charlie XCX. I haven't had a chance to listen to too much of her music yet. So, what about her that appeals to you?
um I guess just like I really like a lot of her more experimental material, the two pop mixtapes that she did, and then the pandemic album.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm really fond of some of the collaborators that she uses often are just like really amazing, adventurous producers looking for like really weird sounds, things, textures you just don't haven't heard in music before exactly like that. People like BJ Burton, and um, who's the other PC music guy who works with her a lot. I'll remember in a minute, but yeah, just producers who are like just searching for adventurous sounds. I find that really interesting. And although, this album was pushing more towards pop than I've done in the past, I mean, I'm definitely not mainstream pop or anything like that, but I really identify with the idea of pop music. And just to me, that's a message that's easy to understand, and um, a melody that is like that's catchy, and that kind of earworm quality that gets into your head. I love that.
Mhm. So, following up on that, how would you describe the music that you make?
Um, I would describe it as, yeah, I mean, I usually do say pop music, and I use that as like a bit of a umbrella. And I usually talk about the sort of like classic songwriting stuff that I think is, I wrote my whole last album on piano,
Mhm.
and this one is about half and half. But there's a when especially when I write on piano, I like to kind of approach it in a way where I want the song to work as just a vocal and a piano part. Not that that's the finished version at all, but just that I find that that's a good, um, it's a good mental place to try and write from. And then this record, I brought some more guitar playing back in, which is, something that I've mostly played guitar since I was a teenager. So, um, yeah, it's been nice to find a way to bring that back in to my project in a way that feels authentic and right. And like when I wrote my last record, it was like 2016 or 17. Like there really wasn't a lot of guitar music in the indie alternative. There was a lot of R&B happening, a lot of different things that were influencing me at that time. And it's been really cool to see how, you know, alternative music from the late 90s and early 2000s has come back into
Mhm.
our consciousness and been reimagined, and that's helped me find a place for guitar in my work too.
Mhm. Yeah, and listen, I find pop music quite interesting because unlike the other genres of music like rock or rap or R&B, there's no defining sound of pop. It just
Mm-hmm.
happens to be what's popular at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because pop is
Yeah.
short for popular. So it can be anything really.
Mm-hmm. Totally. It's a big umbrella.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And on one hand, you can have like very mainstream people like I guess Taylor Swift, but on the other hand, you have people like Charlie XCX, and they can all be categorized as pop music, even though you cannot mistake one for the other.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
So I actually got to know you from Peggy Hogan or Wally, whose record label, I believe, Next Door, you signed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how did you and her come to be connected?
Through Charlotte Cornfield, who is also on Next Door Records, and Charlotte has been a friend for quite a long time, since we both lived in Montreal for a while, and then we worked at Burdock Music Hall together, running the music hall for 4 years in Toronto. And yeah, so I knew I was looking for a new label for this album, and I pretty much made the whole record before bringing it to them. And just having heard good things through Charlotte, I think that helped me connect with Peggy, and I think she really understood the music, and I felt really at home there.
Mhm. Yeah. So tell me about the relationship that you had with your previous label. So what led to the disillusion, so to speak?
It was just kind of like we made one record, and it that seemed to be the natural conclusion of our relationship. And they're
Mhm.
out of Montreal, and I guess I kind of envisioned, you know, working with a label that overlaps a bit more with my musical community here in Toronto. Not that Next Door is like Toronto only. It's definitely a Canadian all over Canada, but it's just a label where like I feel that I either know a lot of people who are on the label, or I know of them and they're friends of friends, or I just feel I'm in it's the same circle that I am in or want to be in. Um yeah, so it's just, natural conclusion of one working together on one record. Yeah.
Mhm. All right. So yeah, I've met Becky on this very podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to schedule another conversation with her next week, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be very fun. Me and her, we've been pretty good friends since, despite the fact that we haven't quite met in person yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe she's based in Montreal, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, she's an amazing artist, and wears multiple hats really well. Yeah.
yeah, of course. I was in Canada for 4 years, even though I've never lived in Montreal. I've been there twice, and I've enjoyed this every visit that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, tell me about how you've moved from Montreal to Toronto.
Yeah, it took a long time. I mean, I moved to Montreal right when I finished university, and I grew up in Vancouver, so moved all the way across the country, lived in Montreal for 4 years, and then moved to Ontario, not to Toronto right away. I lived in Kitchener for a while. Then I moved to Toronto. Then I moved to Hamilton. Then moved back to Toronto. And yeah, I mean, I've had a partner that whole time who I've moved with, and a lot of our decisions have been mutual decisions of following, similar or supporting each other through going back to school or things like that. But yeah, I really feel like Toronto is my musical home, and I think the 4 years that I worked at Burdock were really helped me feel like established in the city, and like there was a like-minded group of musicians here that I saw myself as part of. And um yeah, Montreal's amazing, and I love Montreal too. And but yeah, this feels like home.
So, is there a noticeable difference between the respective, I guess, alt pop musical scenes of Montreal and Toronto?
Yeah, I mean they have different flavors. I mean, I don't know. I think Toronto feels like a place that's just got a bit of everything, and sometimes the like little musical circles feel small, and sometimes it just feels like there's like a bit of everything happening here, and it's not always connected. I think, as an Anglophone living in Montreal, it feels like a much smaller.
Hmm.
um I don't know what it would feel like to live there as a francophone, but as an Anglophone is kind of like a small community of people, even though it's a big city, is kind of like a smaller scene within it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Hmm.
I hear that yeah, Montreal has a good amount of English speakers, but it's not the same in anywhere in Quebec, where
Hmm.
you find virtually none of them. They're all like French speakers.
Yeah,
So I've heard.
yeah. I mean, most like Montrealers, native Montrealers speak English, but I find that you need to, if you want to exist there in a long-term way, you need to be bilingual. Even though you can totally get by doing everything
Yeah,
normal day-to-day life, to feel involved in the city in like a deeper way, I
mhm,
think being bilingual is pretty important.
I see. So so I'm guessing you do not speak French then.
No, I speak a little bit. I speak enough to get by, but I couldn't, for example, work in French or
Uh-huh.
yeah.
I see. I'm currently living in Budapest, Hungary now, and I tend to I intend to settle here for a long time. So
Oh wow.
one of the missions that I'm learning is that I'm trying to do is to study the language, which is it's difficult at first, but I think once you find out how the language works, it gets easier.
That's amazing. Good for you.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you very much. So, where were you during the pandemic of 2020?
I was in Hamilton, and moved back to Toronto in 2021.
Mhm.
Is that right? Yeah. So yeah, in Hamilton, um, my partner was finishing school there, and yeah, it was really quiet. A lot of hanging out at home by myself, like a lot of people.
Mhm.
A lot of lonely times, and yeah, a lot of working on music remotely. Did a lot of remote sessions with Andrew Rasmussen, who co-produced the record with me, and did a whole bunch of remote sessions with Charlotte Cornfield, my friend who I mentioned, who co-wrote 4 of the songs on the album with me. Um, so yeah, it was a lot of learning to work in different ways through that time.
So, yeah. So
Hmm.
I'm guessing the album that we're listening, most of it was produced remotely.
Most of it, yeah. I mean, there was 3 days in a studio with a drummer, bass player, and doing also piano. And those were pretty important days. And then by the time we were kind of like doing the finishing touches, we were through the worst of the pandemic, and Andrew and I could sit in a room together and sort of hammer out the details. And that was pretty helpful in terms of working quickly and making final decisions. It's hard to do
Mhm.
over Zoom.
Yeah. So, how did you feel when the final stages of the album are finished?
Yeah, it was such a slow process that with like a bunch of sort of starts and stops that, and maybe it's just my personality a little bit, but it's hard to it's hard to feel the it's hard to really linger in the feeling of accomplishment. You kind of just, and I think maybe this is just part of being an artist in modern society, is that there's always something next. So you're just like, okay, I made the music. Now I have to make like a ton of videos. I have to figure out how to like bring a new visual like language to this album and how to express it through photos and graphic design, um and then it's like, okay, I got to plan some shows. Okay, I've got to like figure out how to promote this on the internet. It just kind of, it feels a little bit like it never stops. And so it's hard to find those moments when you're like, I made this. I'm really proud of this. And I am, but it's hard to stop and appreciate those things.
I understand. Yeah. So, do you consider yourself a perfectionist when it comes to music production?
I mean, I don't think I'm at all approaching perfection, but I think I'm somebody who definitely focuses on details and really, you know, it's to me it's a big thing to do this record, like it took years. It feels momentous to put music out in the world under your own name that's like about your life, and it feels big sometimes, and I really do strive to make every part of it as good as I can make it.
Mhm.
And I have high expectations of myself. And yeah, so I think it's hard sometimes. I do struggle with perfectionism, and it's something I've talked about before. And yeah, I think, you know, it's nice to have more music out in the world, having a second album. Hopefully, I'll just kind of keep going. It feels each time it feels less precious. Like the feeling of putting out your first record is just like really intense, and I found, really hard. It's like it just feels like it matters so much, but with each new batch of music you put out in the world, it feels a little bit like, okay, but people can see it in the context of my whole career and all the music I've made, and not every song has to be like the defining song of my sound. These can be disparate little explorations. Let me go in this direction for a little bit. Let me try this. Let me, do something different for one song, and then, do something more, you know, more under my umbrella again, or maybe I'll try a whole album of something that's a different direction. It feels more and more possible to do that.
Mhm. I see. And if there is a third album, well, I look forward to listening to it.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think as an independent musician, it can be quite risky to release an album, really, like especially in your case, taking
Hmm.
some time before releasing it. Because
Hmm.
I've um, I've interviewed a multitude of independent musicians on this program, and they've all resorted to releasing like one single every few months instead of like
Totally.
years to do an album. It's for practicality and all that. So,
Yeah.
do you think that the risk that you've chosen to take paid off?
It's a good question, and one that I think about as well. I mean, I honestly don't know. I mean, it might be that song by song is a better strategy for promotion, but this feels like a more true way to express the art that I want to make. And at the end of the day, like I'm definitely concerned with promotion and figuring out how to get new ears to this music. I mean, that's the point of doing it, is for people to listen to it. But it's also to like express myself through art in the way that feels most essential and important to me. So, yeah, I think I sometimes think of kind of going down that road, but there's something about making a body of work, like an album, that is deeper for me and produces better work, I think, as you consider each song in relation to other songs. And, there's certainly no one right way to do this, but for me, it feels like it deepens the practice and the the music that comes out is closer to what I'm imagining.
Mhm. Would you consider that an advantage in independent music production in that you basically get to control however your music is going to sound and not being dictated by someone higher up than you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's good to have autonomy. And I think most artists these days have that, you
Mhm.
know, whether you're on a big label or not. I'm sure there's like different pressures, but I don't know. I think at the end of the day, most people make the music that they want to make. And I don't have a very cynical view of that part of the music industry because it's just so hard to make music and put it out in the world that I think anybody who goes to the trouble of doing it is following through on something that feels, true to them. I don't think it's very easy uh to half-ass it. I think it's there's so much work at every stage that in a way I think it guarantees that you believe in what you're doing.
Mhm. Yeah.
You have to.
So, do you see yourself being signed into like a major label?
No.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
No, definitely not.
But nevertheless, it's the challenge of being an indie musician is that all of the non-music related stuff that is in relations to your getting
Yeah,
your music out there, you kind of have to do it
totally.
on your own.
Totally. Yeah. When I'm feeling optimistic about it, I look at it as like a big art project, and that, each thing that you create, videos or photos or social media posts are, just further opportunities to express your art. But there's definitely days when I don't feel like doing all of the promo, um and sometimes I just don't. And you know, it's hard because it feels like there's no end to the amount of promo that you could do. And so it's hard to find that place where you feel like you accomplished what you set out to do. You kind of For me, I'm always left feeling like, well, I could have done more, but I just didn't want to, or I did the amount that felt right for me, and then I focused on other things in my life. I enjoyed my family. I went outside and did stuff. I worked on other projects that felt exciting at the time, and so those are all conscious choices, but at the end of the day, it's hard. It always feels like there's a pressure to do more as an independent artist.
I see. So speaking of family, I hope you had a good Canadian Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm. Yeah. So how was it? What did you do?
Um, yeah, we had like a big family meal. And it was also my daughter's second birthday. So
Oh,
we had a birthday party for her um, on the weekend as well.
mhm.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was it
so
was good.
so you're a family man as well as a musician.
Yeah, I mean, I have a kid and a partner, and yeah, that's definitely a big part of my life.
Mhm. So your partner, assuming it's a her, it's a she, her.
Yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned her going to school in Hamilton. Was it McMaster's?
Yeah.
I see. I once tried to apply for a master's program there, but yeah, what did she major in?
In medicine. Yeah, she's a
Oh, wow.
doctor.
Oh,
Yeah.
like is she practicing now?
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So do you go to school as well?
Nope, I'm not in school right now. I'm doing some composing work on
Mm,
the side, writing for advertisements.
I see.
And yeah, I've been kind of just starting to get into that over the past year and
Mm,
enjoying it.
mhm. Yeah,
It's
it's
nice to work on music that's not under your own name sometimes, and you don't feel like it has to represent you as a person. You
oh
feel
yeah.
more free to just create things for other people, following what they need. And it's just nice to, like, be playing instruments and doing stuff, and it's not also a reflection of you that's going to be seen by everyone in the world. Sometimes that's a bit of a it's a heavy weight you don't always want to carry.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. And I think it's important for a musician to have a have a job or a gig that is separate from music that that gives you like steady and a steady income, especially when in your case you're having a family and whatnot, because it is definitely the case these days that being a musician, unless you are a really famous musician, does not make you money.
Totally. Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, but it is the state of affairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you often like push out like CDs or like merchandise in order to make some income off of that, the music venture?
No, not really. I mean, to be honest, I don't see my personal music project as a very successful money making scheme at all. You know, I try to get I try to make sure that I'm paid fairly for the work I do when I can, but yeah, it's just, that's just the music business that we live in right now, is that music is not very highly valued. And I wish it was a different way, but it's not. So,
Hmm,
I just work within it, and I find a way to make the art that I want to make. We're very lucky in Canada to have a lot of grant programs, and
yeah,
that is a big part of how I've been able to make my music. And for a lot of artists in Canada, that's, a big part of how we make art.
hmm, yeah. So I've heard, yeah, many of the independent musicians that I've had on this show said that, without that grant, it would be impossible for them to make music, basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, what yeah, I think it's a really positive thing, because what we end up spending money on is paying other people, paying musicians, paying recording studios, paying mixing engineers. The money just goes straight out into other people's pockets, and I think that's a good thing. So yeah, we're lucky to have that system in Canada.
I see. Yeah, I do hear that. I guess because of streaming and maybe people gravitating towards that rather than physical media. The music itself would not be making you too much money, so
Hmm.
musicians have to do shows instead. So,
Yeah.
do you plan on doing performances in order to like support the album?
Yeah, it's something that I want to fully realize in the same way that I realized the album. And, as a solo musician, it takes time to put together the band that
Mhm,
you want, to arrange the music. My music is not, because it's very studio oriented, it's not immediately obvious how to play it live. So it takes some time.
mhm,
It can be done well, but it takes me time to figure it out, how to arrange it, who's going to play what, how are we going to play these samples, are we going to, play to a track, or are we going to play live, are we all of these little choices. So I am working towards that, but yeah, there'll be some shows, but not a super big tour or anything like that.
I see. So, to what
Mostly local things.
I see. So, to what extent have you, I suppose, gained experience from when you first started out to now in regards to promoting your own music?
Quite a lot. I mean, I learned a lot with my first record, my first album, and yeah, I think, I'm still always learning and going down YouTube rabbit holes about music promotion and trying to learn the ways that the industry is changing all the time. And I'm interested in that, but it's also a lot to keep up with. Um, but yeah, it's the business that I'm in, so there's desire to understand how it works and understand how I can find a little corner of it for myself, not expecting that much out of it, but just the important thing to me is reaching people with the music and trying to figure out how to get it to the people who might care about it and who might let it into their life in some way, and to form connections with people over it. you know that's what it's about to me.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess that is another, I guess, double-edged advantage of being an independent musician. That is, you get to set your own hours. You don't have a fixed hours like a 9 to 5 job,
Hmm.
uh, but the downside to that is that you don't know when will your day off be because you always kind of have to be on all the time.
Totally. Yep, I think that's true.
Mhm. So, in that vein, how do you take days off?
Well, I kind of have a because all of my work is mostly self-employed. I pretty much just I do my own personal music work as well as composing, and I keep all of that to pretty much during the week. And yeah, I mean, having a kid
Mhm.
puts routine into your life too, in a good way. And in some ways you have less time, but you're a little bit more efficient with the time you have. And yeah, I don't work on weekends. I just try and keep it regular, like 9 to 5, whatever part of my music I'm working on, whether it's promotion or making, I've been making videos. It feels like for the last 6 months, I've been mostly just like figuring out how to make a video, shooting it, editing it myself, putting it out. And then like the next week, it's like time to come up with another idea for a video, time to plan the shoot it, edit it, next idea. Like I've kind of I made 4 videos for this record, and that was taking up a lot of my music time.
Mhm. Yeah. So tell me more about the video production.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with the videos I did for this record. I directed them all and edited them all. Worked with a cinematographer on them all, and yeah, it's just I've had some fun collaborations in the past on music videos, but this time I just wanted to, I guess, feel like yeah, just gain the skill of being able to do it by myself and feel a little bit more autonomous. And sometimes it's also like, if I'm going to keep making art, it feels like the sometimes the only way to do it is to figure out how to do everything yourself. And I know that's not really the answer, but when you can't really always afford to bring in very many collaborators, there's power in being able to realize your ideas um, by yourself sometimes. And it's not my first choice. I'd love to just like hire amazing people all the time and collaborate with them. But there's also something that's satisfying about finding a way to present myself in visuals and in music videos in a way that I have been imagining but haven't been able to necessarily bring to life in such a true way as I have with this record.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing about the gig economy, right, in which we're in.
Hmm.
In that you get to make money off of skills that previously thought unimaginable, but then again, it doesn't mean that the job or the pay is steady.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. But yeah, it's been really fun creating visual language for the album, and I feel really happy with how it all turned out. I also did all the graphic design myself, and worked with a photographer and my friend who styled me and helped me choose clothes and figure out the visual direction of this. And yeah, I feel really proud of that work that we did to create a visual language for this music. I feel like that was a success.
nevertheless, it can be fun, surrounding yourself with creative people, whether you pay
Absolutely.
them or not.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because it whatever field of creativity that you're in, it almost like you speak the same language or
Mm-hmm.
similar tongue.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think there's more informal ways that that happens, when you're asking friends about what they think of music or things like that. But, anytime I'm working with somebody on my project, I do feel like a real responsibility to pay them fairly.
Yeah,
And I think, so I'm kind of like a little bit cautious to bring people in unless I know that I have the money set aside to really pay them in a fair way.
let's see. Yeah.
But that's
So,
something I've learned, I think.
now tell me about the title of your album after this.
Yeah, I mean, is the title of is taken from one of the songs.
Mhm.
Um, and in naming the album, I think it felt like a nice expression of the idea of transition, which is a core theme that a lot of these songs revolve around. You know, the transitions that happened during the pandemic, the fact that I was moved from a city to city, becoming a parent. Um, there's a lot of different things, transitions happening, and it felt after this to me is like, yeah, just an expression of the before time and the after time. And um, yeah, it felt like a nice way to express that for me.
Yeah. So tell me about your upbringing in Vancouver.
Hmm. Yeah, I grew up in East Vancouver and in a musical family. My dad is a composer
Mhm. Well,
and my mom is a piano teacher. And yeah, so I had a lot of exposure to different types of music, a lot of classical music. I grew up playing cello, classical cello for quite a while. And then as a teenager, kind of followed my own interest in rock music, pop music, and learned to play guitar, formed a band, played in the local music scene quite a lot, um, in a band. And yeah, that's the roots of my music making is through all of those things.
let's see. Yeah. So are your parents still back in Vancouver?
Yeah, yeah, they live in Vancouver.
Let's see. So I'm guessing during Thanksgiving you kind of have to fly back to see them.
Yeah, I mean, we don't travel back and forth that often. Didn't see them this Thanksgiving, but yeah, we travel, when we can to see each other.
Mhm. Yeah,
Hmm.
I've been to Vancouver once or twice, and I have distant family there. Uh,
Mm.
I know that if you fly from Toronto to Vancouver, it can take somewhere like 3 to 4 hours, right? Or three and a
More
half.
than that, 4.5 to 5.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty far.
I see. Yeah, and but the weather's better. Yeah, that I can give that.
Yeah. It depends on how you look at it. The winters are warmer, but it's also a lot rainier. There's a lot more sunshine here during the winter,
Oh, really?
which is a nice thing. I've come to appreciate it. It's cold, there's more snow, things like that, but so much more sun here,
Hmm.
so much more. And the winters can feel long in Vancouver when it's just rain for like 2 weeks and no sun. That's a different type of intensity.
I see. So tell me about some of the musical acts that got you to, I suppose, ditch the cello and pursue rock music.
It's a good question. I was into things like the Beatles and classic, what we now call classic rock, but things like that, and bands like, the Unicorns, um, things that were kind of starting to be like a little weirder. Bands like Deerhoof were really important, like to my overall musical upbringing and language. Um, I think also just like I have really strong memories of pop radio too, in the era of late 90s R&B, TLC, like those sorts of groups, as well as more other pop groups like Savage Garden, and things that I kind of really looked down on for a lot of time after that I'm now gaining appreciation for and understanding. I don't know, just acceptance of how important they were to my overall musical language. And um, I was just really drawn to catchy music. And yeah, so I think that those are some of the things that kind of pushed me in that direction. And, you know, yeah, I don't know. The guitar is just a much more social instrument, and a much, maybe it would have been different if I'd seen more people playing cello in a different way, but it felt, I don't know, I think I just needed to find a new direction that was my own choosing, you know, that was not an instrument that I grew up playing because uh my parents kind of led me in that direction. It was like more like I wanted to play something, so I did it. And I guess that's part of my personality, is being a bit of a contrarian who needs to go their own way with things. And that's what guitar was to me as a teenager. It was like, I'm choosing this, and I'm doing music the way I want to do it.
Hmm. Yeah. So I'm guessing that led you to move from Vancouver to Montreal.
It was part of it, yeah. I was kind of just ready to live somewhere different. I had lot of some friends who were starting to move away, and I think I just wanted the experience of living in different cities. And um I'm glad that I did that. And now I'm settled on the other side of the country. It's complicated, but uh yeah, I just that was something I valued, was getting different experiences and exploring other parts of Canada and the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about some of the places that you've traveled to.
Um Traveled in the States. I mean, I did some shows in in New York City for the last album tour. Went down there a couple of times. That was interesting. Really, yeah, neat to get to know the city of New York a little bit more than I did, which was none. um, been to LA a number of times. I really, really like it there.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I've traveled in some other parts of the world just for fun to places like Spain, Portugal, um, London, Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd love to have you in this part of Europe too. Budapest is a lovely
that'd be
city.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I've never been. I would really, really like to explore sometime.
Mhm. So, are there any venue or venues in Toronto that you find to be the best as a performer?
I feel like I'm kind of agnostic in terms of venues. Like I don't I don't have really strong feelings about them. I think, certainly there's rooms that feel better or have better sound or things like that, but I don't know, there's a lot of I'd say the majority of the venues feel lackluster in some way to me, and they're flawed in one way or another way. And it's okay. There's you great things still happen there,
Mhm.
but they happen there in spite of those things. So I guess it's just not the thing that inspires me. It feels like we, as musicians, bring those rooms to life
Mhm.
and make exciting experiences happen there, but not because the rooms have any inherent magic. Except for maybe Massey Hall, which is a giant, theater, which really does seem to have some magic,
Mhm.
in my opinion. But most venues are just, and we've lost so many venues during the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's such a hard business to be in, having helped run a music hall. It's such a hard business to be in, running a venue, that they feel a little bit devoid of love. It's hard to put love into a music venue because it doesn't give a lot back. It's a bit of a sad view of it, but
Yeah.
that's the way it is in Toronto, just based on how expensive it is to afford space here and
I see.
those sorts of things.
I see. So I'm guessing the city is still like experiencing a lull in the music scene, so to speak.
It seems like it, yeah. And I've been asking people I know in other cities, and there've been differing responses, but it really feels like there's a part of the local music scene here that hasn't bounced back still. That there's a lot of touring acts and those sorts of things are back up to maybe what they were before, but it's the loss of the small venues that hurts the local scene the most. And yeah, I don't know. There's still exciting things happening, but it feels uh, it feels like there's a part of our local scene that is continually threatened by the unlivable conditions of the city, how expensive it is for artists, for everybody, but how expensive it is for artists as well, and how hard it is to make money at making art, like, and how hard it is for venues to exist, and how hard it is to get a rehearsal space. And there's just so many challenges right now.
I certainly hope things turn around soon.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, who are some of the artists that you would like to open for?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, somebody like Francis and the Lights is an artist who never performs live, but who I feel like a pretty strong connection to, and I would love to do something with them. I feel like that would be a really cool pairing. Um, I don't know, uh, maybe a band like Phoenix or um, yeah, I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, I see. And I do detect like several notable similarities between yours and Francis and Eliza's music.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's a big
haven't.
touchstone for me, and
Mhm.
again, an artist that I feel really pushes the envelope in terms of production, but also involves some of those like sort of core songwriting elements that are
Oh,
important to me.
oh yeah, and I I revisit his music recently because I listened to your album, and yeah, quite he's quite the artist. He's quite
He's
creative.
amazing. Yeah. So mysterious.
Yeah, so he is. So
Yeah. I wonder if and when we'll ever see more music from him. I'm very interested.
me too. Yeah, I look forward to it. So final question for you, Adrian. What does music mean to you?
I think it's like it's about expression and connection, a way to express our feelings that are sometimes hard to express and a way to connect with other people about, around those feelings in ways it's, we all want to be connected, but it can be hard. And it can be hard to find the words and yeah, or just be in the right situation to talk about certain things. And I think music is a unique opportunity to connect with people in an emotional way and to agree on, I don't know, not necessarily agree, but just yeah, to just bridge that gap sometimes that exists.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you very much, Adrian Underhill, for joining this show.
Thanks so much for having me.